Hi, everyone. Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to the Author Journey. Today's Author Journey will be featuring Nova Scotia author Joanne Gallant. I'm very excited about this particular interview today. Of course, I'm always excited about all of the interviews, aren't I? But this is one for today's interview. Today's Author Journey will be the last one before we go on summer break. So really appreciate all of the authors who have participated so far in the author journey. But Joanne Gallant comes to us fresh off a win with the Atlantic Book Awards. Her first book, a memoir, A Womb in the Shape of a Heart, was the winner of the Margaret and John Savage First Book Award. So we're really, really thrilled to have her here. Joanne is a pediatric nurse and writer. She's a graduate of Mount Allison University and the University of Alberta. In 2019, she was selected by the Writers' Federation of Nova Scotia as an apprentice writer in the Alistair Mentorship program, and we'll find out a little bit more about that from Joanne. She lives in Halifax with her husband and son, and this, A Womb in the Shape of a Heart, is her debut. And hopefully she's working on more because there have been rave reviews. I'm going to read what's in the book blurb in the book just to sort of give you a bit of insight, and then we'll have Joanne share more insight into her author journey. A 30-year-old pediatric nurse with dreams of motherhood, Joanne Gallant was confident that she and her partner would conceive soon after they married. It was a matter of when, not if. And yet, her first pregnancy, a set of twins, is riddled with dangerous complications that endanger her life and results in devastating loss. After emergency surgery, Gallant is diagnosed with a biocornuate uterus, a rare condition also known as a heart-shaped womb. There is no cure, no pill, no surgery that can alter her fate. What is happening to her now was preordained long before her own birth. As motherhood continues to elude her, Gallant and her partner navigate the world of infertility up until pregnancy that results, to their astonishment, in the premature birth of their son. What follows are not the blissful pastel days of early motherhood, but months of severe postpartum anxiety and post-traumatic stress. She is sure her son will be taken from her. It is a matter of when, not if. Punctuated by moments of incredible joy as she raises her young son, A Womb in the Shape of a Heart is the intimate story of Gallant's journey through miscarriage and motherhood, holding space for the complicated paradoxes of grief and gratitude, of life and death, and the impenetrable depths of a mother's love. Oh my goodness, I wasn't sure I was going to get through that without further ado. I'm going to bring Joanne up to join me. Thank you so much, Joanne. Oh my goodness, welcome to the author journey. Thank you for joining us today on the last day of school.
I know, exciting. Thank you for that wonderful intro. That was so beautiful.
Oh my goodness, I'm so choked up. I don't know how you're going to get through this.
I should have put some Kleenex in here. I don't think I did.
Oh dear. Well, yeah, I was going to say I'll use my sleeve, but I have short sleeves. But I wanted to start with a little bit about that Alistair McLeod mentorship program, because I mentioned it in your biography. And for those of you who follow the author journey regularly, we did an interview with Marilyn Smulders from the Writers' Federation, and she talked a lot about the Alistair McLeod mentorship program. And here we have with us an example of, what can happen when you go through that program. So share a little bit about that experience.
Sure. Yeah. The Alistair McLeod Mentorship Program is so close to my heart. It is, I think, the reason I'm sitting here, the reason I have a book. I had joined the Writers' Federation, I want to say the year before I applied to the mentorship program. So I would get the emails and kind of see what things they had to offer, what workshops they were holding. And then I decided to apply, and I had never either, I had never really submitted my work to many places before. And when I found out, yes, I was so excited. And then I was so nervous because I was going to have to send my whole manuscript. I had, a couple drafts done of this book already. And I was going to have to then share it with someone else. And I was paired with, yeah, it was very nerve wracking. And I was paired with the wonderful Carol Glasser Langell, who took such good care of this story and me during the process. We met in December, and then the program, it was December of 2019 is when it started. And then obviously COVID, it kind of shifted into virtual in March, but we spent many afternoons, in her house, and she would, make me coffee, and we would go through page after page, and she gave me such good edits and such good perspective, especially when you're writing a memoir. It was really helpful to have a really objective person look at it, because she didn't know me before this program. So it was really helpful for her to say, you kind of skipped over a couple of years. What happened here? Whereas in my head, it's very easy to kind of understand what happened because it was my life.
Yeah,
where she's like, no, I want to explore that a little bit more.
Yeah.
And,
It's the
without
mental
her,
ellipsis that we need to take people along with us. Yeah.
exactly. Yes. And she, she guided me towards a copy that I was able to then submit. And it was that, manuscript that got accepted. So, Linda, Marilyn, everyone at the Writers Fed, I just have such, oh, like love for. And we just had the 20th anniversary a couple of weeks ago of it. And I got to hear all the readers and the current mentees and mentors. So it's just a beautiful program. So
That's amazing. And how long was the process?
the program itself ran for 5 months. So we had kind of our intro meeting in December, and then it kind of kicked off the first week of January. And then we had a couple of group meetings. So we would meet as a group and kind of talk about our process, and our mentors would talk about what it was like. And then because of COVID, we didn't get to do the in-person readings, but we got the opportunity to make these videos, which was really neat. So they had these artists create videos that went along with our words that we were able to read. So it was, they did a really great job of wrapping it up. And Carol and I are still, friendly. We message back and forth, and I've gone to visit her. And so, yeah, I was very lucky to be in it.
Oh, that's amazing. And you mentioned that you had a draft of your manuscript done before you started the program.
Yes. So my goal was to really make it better. Like, I knew it needed work, and I felt like I had kind of taken it to a place where I needed some help with. And so when I applied, I think I applied in October, I had already done a couple of drafts, and my first drafts, and everyone's going to like roll their eyes. My first drafts are very first drafty. Like, they're terrible. They're so bad. And so this was like the third draft that I had been working on. And I was like, oh, I don't really know where to take it. And I was just so lucky that I got into that program, and they were able, like Carol was able to take me through, a next draft. And then we kind of worked on some other pieces. And then in May is when I sent it in. So right at the end of the program, we were kind of done it. And then I sent it.
That's a very advanced thinking for a new author, because, I get a lot of manuscripts and people say, this is the final manuscript. And I'm like, oh, no.
Right.
So let's rewind a little bit, or a lot, I guess, to the why. As the description of your book indicates, you had a very tough time getting pregnant and keeping a pregnancy. You've had several miscarriages, such trauma to have gone through. What was it that motivated you to actually write your story?
Well, I always wrote since I was a child. When things were difficult, I always kept a diary from the age of 9 until in my 20s. And I would always write things out. And I tended to turn to it when I was going through difficult things. And so it was very natural for me to turn to journaling and writing during the process of all my miscarriages and experiences with infertility. And I started therapy after my 4th miscarriage. So my son was about 2, and I started therapy, and it kind of like unlocked this this desire in me to write more intentionally, not just journaling.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think every writer is usually a big reader. And so I had turned to books during all of my miscarriages. And I looked for every book out there about women who'd gone through similar things. And, I had gotten so much from reading those stories. And I sort of felt, I have a lot to say on this, and maybe I can contribute in some way to this, these stack of books that I have that have really helped me.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's story is so different. And so I had never really read a story, obviously, where it looked like me, because,
Mm-hmm.
it's all unique and everything that we go through. So that was kind of my why. And then after I kind of realized that this was what I was going to write, it kind of flew out of me. And I had tried writing,
I love
I
it.
always thought, I always wanted
It's
to write a
meant to be.
novel.
Oh,
Yes.
excellent.
And when I would sit down to write, it was this story that kept coming out. And I feel like I needed to get this out in order to
Mm-hmm.
make space for something else to kind of
Right.
come through
And
me.
instead of writing a fictionalized story
Mhm.
where the central character goes through what you went through, you've probably
Yeah.
felt, well, I might as well just tell it as my story.
Right. It
Yeah.
was getting to the point where I'm like, well, I'm just writing my story at this point.
Right.
I might as well just keep my own name at this
Yeah.
point.
Well, and you know what? Very courageous, because I know a lot of writers, and you always weave in your own experiences, and
Mhm.
and what you discover the more you write, and find your author voice and the things that are unique to you, and writing the story that only you can write, which is something that Nicola said in her, and I loved it. It just really resonated, and I know it resonated with other people.
Mhm.
Um, but I've woven in real life scenarios into my books, but I'm not nearly brave enough to actually write the full memoir yet. But stay tuned. Um, so
Well, thank you for saying
true. Oh, it's very
that.
true, and the bravery, and also the fact that you are a pediatric nurse, that adds a whole new layer to the
Mhm.
experience and to your story that may not have been part of the other books that you read. So, was the fact that you're a pediatric nurse, not just a nurse, but a pediatric nurse, um, a good thing or a bad thing when you were going through all of these experiences and the miscarriages?
Probably a bit of both. Probably a bit of
Right.
both.
Hmm.
I have more than sort of the layman's knowledge on the way that things work.
Hmm.
And perhaps I had seen a little too much as far as, I worked in the intensive care unit
Hmm.
prior to my son being born. So I certainly was not innocent to the way that things can go badly in our
Hmm.
bodies.
Hmm.
And then also, it was frustrating sometimes because it's still very difficult for me to navigate the healthcare system.
Hmm.
I felt kind of as if I was in this black hole of healthcare because all of my miscarriages happened early, so 12 weeks and earlier, and there wasn't really any place for me to turn to. It
Hmm.
wasn't easy for me to access, services. I would have to go to emergency room. And I always found, if I find it difficult as a
Right.
nurse in the system, I can only imagine how difficult it can be for other people to know where to go
Right.
and things like that.
Well,
Um,
this might be a nice time to pause and ask you to maybe do a reading
sure.
from A Womb in the Shape of a Heart. I'll share. It's here, but I'm also going to bring the cover up while you're sharing that with us. So
Wonderful. I'd love to.
give us a
Now my
little um, update or a
Yeah, a little lead up to
yeah,
it.
yeah.
So yeah.
That's exactly what I meant.
So this comes from the part of my book where I have just had I forget now sometimes my fifth miscarriage. So this is just after I found out that the baby was not going to make it, and I'm going for surgery. I am waiting for my surgeon to arrive. My view of the OR ceiling is hauntingly familiar. A nurse connects me to a cardiac monitor, and I don't respond to her small talk about the hurricane on its way. I am tucked inside my head, trying to remember who I am, but I keep coming up short. I don't know who I am if I am not trying to make a baby, keep a baby, have a baby. Has my desire to procreate become a chronic disease I need to treat? While lying on the stretcher, I can smell the sour milk of a newborn's neck, the scent of diaper balm, pink baby lotion. There is no baby here. My mind is creating things I want to be true. I feel like I am on fire. A rush of heat travels up my arm, dissipating in my chest as a doctor pushes the milky white anesthetic into my IV. A mask is placed over my mouth and nose. The oxygen smells strangely chemical, like plastic, and nothing like air. I blink, and it's dark. Joey is holding my clammy hand, and I feel worse than I remember feeling after any of my past surgeries. Perhaps because this baby had made it further along, it will take me longer to recover physically. Or perhaps losing so many is taking an even more devastating toll. My nurse gives me an extra dose of analgesic, noticing my rapid breaths, and I try to go back to sleep. The dark nothing of surgery was a relief, but I am unable to slip back into its comforting void. How old is your son? My nurse asks. He's 2, I say, opening my eyes, and I smile. Joey squeezes my hand and gives a tiny smile too. All of this, I wave my arms around the recovery room to indicate my current situation, is showing me just how lucky we are to have him. It is a knee-jerk response to use my son as a splint against my pain. My attempt to put others at ease by hiding behind an armor of his existence. My nurse looks up seriously from her page and says, "You don't have to say that. It's good to be grateful, but you don't have to say that right now." I put down my armor, allowing myself to be unprotected, vulnerable. I am sad. I'm the saddest I have ever been. Most people want to hear how grateful and appreciative I am to be a mother, because it makes them more comfortable in my presence. I've learned to sandwich any discussion about my miscarriages with, "But I have a son," to put others at ease. My recovery room nurse has read my encyclopedia-sized chart, riddled with complications, diagnoses, tests, and the outline of my dead babies in sequential order. She is accepting my sadness in its uninhibited form, not demanding a more palatable version. She cares for me without making small talk. She helps me into my mesh underwear and pad, gives me pills that I take with sips of cold water from a thimble-sized cup. My throat feels like sandpaper. When I'm allowed to leave, she hugs me tightly, and when we pull away, she puts her hands on my shoulders. "I'll be thinking of you, Joanne," she says, and I see a wetness in her eyes as she squeezes my shoulders. I believe her.
Wow, that's incredible. And just for those of you who have not read Joanne's book yet, like the whole book is as beautifully heart-wrenching, but with a tiny little thread of hopefulness. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Thank
and
you.
it's so true. And it is a sensitive topic, and it's not something even now that people, talk about openly. So I'm curious, even now that the book's out, how do you respond to people who are obviously uncomfortable, even though you're so open to talking about it? Like, what do you say to people who don't know what to say, right?
Yeah, I think that's evolved over the years. I think, had you asked me that question even a year ago, my answer would have been different. And I think it's a reflection of just how this grief changes over time. And so for me, right now, what I do is I think people understand that I'm so comfortable and open and talking about it. And so I don't really run into that scenario as much. I struggled a lot more when I really kept myself hidden and kept it hidden because that's what you do. You wait, you don't tell people. It's not a topic to be spoken about at dinner tables or anywhere really. And I kind of discovered that was where my shame really came from is, anytime something's meant to be kept secret, that's where shame really blooms and thrives. And it's almost like I've broken that down with, coming here and talking to you about it and having this book. And as I, put it more out into the world, I feel that it's allowing other people around me to explore how better they can respond to other people. And I'm starting to see like a shift, I suppose, around me, which is really nice.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that, because how sad that, a woman in your situation would feel any kind of shame for something that's happened that was totally beyond their control. Um, and and part of it, I guess, is not knowing how to talk about it. So,
Mm-hmm.
there are still, of course, many people still feel that's a very private thing,
Yeah.
and going through such trauma. So putting that book out there. So you wrote the book, and then you went through the mentorship program. So more
Mm-hmm.
and more eyeballs were on this, and it became closer and closer to a point where, good Lord, this could get published and really get out there. And I also I meant to say this is published by Nimbus.
Yeah.
So we love Nimbus. They're here
Mm-hmm.
local in Halifax.
Yes.
Um, and so part of that also becomes, working very closely with an editor. And I know that you have a very special relationship with your editors.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that
Do.
process, and how, and who your editor is, and how the relationship really helped in the process, because you're reopening a lot of wounds over and over
Yes,
again as
very
you're going
much
through
so.
this.
I was very lucky to have Whitney Moran, who is the managing editor at Nimbus, be my editor. And Whitney and I are friends. We've known each other for a very long time. And she was with me, in person as I was going through these miscarriages. She was a friend that I could turn to who, took me out for lunches and would check in with me, and she's one of the most empathetic people I've ever known. And to have her kind of guide this book to where it needed to be was an incredibly special experience for me. I don't think I could have gone through it without her. She taught me a lot, and one lesson that she really gave me in writing this memoir was not to over edit my past self. So as when you're writing a memoir, it's very much about the events and the
In the
transformation of
moment.
yourself. Yeah.
Hmm.
But there's also this other you that is now on top of it, the person who's writing it and the person who's editing it. And
Hmm.
and they're not always the same time frame. And so, as we went through the process, there would be things that I would read and I didn't recognize that feeling anymore, or
Yeah.
that thought, or that, way of thinking, especially related to the shame aspect that I carried with me.
Hmm.
And she was very cognizant to say, we need to leave that in because that is true to how that was. And also, it's great that you don't feel that way anymore. And so she
Right.
was very wonderful in that regard. And so whenever I go into even looking at other work, even in fiction and stuff, I'm very careful to, okay, what was the emotion that I was experiencing that moment? How do I stay true to that without, overlaying my current self too much on top of it?
Right. Right.
Um,
And
which was a good
editing
lesson.
your past experience.
Yes, yes.
Right. Right.
Yes,
And
we're all on this journey of healing and recovering
yeah.
from the things that we've gone through. And, I'm at this point in my, grief experience. And back then, like, I wrote from those really dark, dark places of loss. And so,
Hmm.
I was just so cared for, and she was so gentle. And I'm just very, very thrilled that I got to have her. She's an incredible
That's
editor, as you
awesome.
know.
Yes. Very
Yeah.
talented, but also exudes empathy. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
Like,
yes,
yeah.
very
Yes.
much so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think this is a really good spot to. Did you prepare a second reading for
I
us?
did. Yes. It's
Yay.
a little
Okay.
bit shorter than the first one. So
That's okay.
I'm just cognizant of our time here.
That's okay. I'm going to bring that back.
And I don't know if this one needs too much of a lead in.
Okay.
It's a bit of a standalone piece on its own. Every parent gives wounds to their child. An unintended inheritance of pain is passed through cells and blood. My father, a Guyanese immigrant, lost his father when he was 9 and moved to an unfamiliar country at 11. The wounds of my father's childhood seep into my life through no fault of his. They persist in the absence of a grandfather, stories of a country I have only ever seen on a map, and how little is remembered or spoken of his early days in Canada. His life as a preteen was likely challenging. He was grieving the loss of his father and trying to learn the customs of a new place. We carry our wounds and pass them along to our children, linking each generation to the next like a chain of wilted daisies. Joey and I talk about what we have given Teddy, what pain he may hold because of us. I'm reading a book about motherhood when I stumble upon the term mother's marks, a term that was once used to describe the birthmarks or moles found on the bodies of babies and small children. It originated with the once held belief that these imperfections on a child's skin were brought about by an ungratified longing in the mother. I put my book down, feeling the weight of how much pressure women bear in carrying a child. We are told so many things will affect our unborn children. The way we sleep can impair blood flow in the umbilical cord. Our emotions can change the heart rate of tiny fetuses. The things we put into our bodies will also go into theirs, causing potentially irreparable damage. No soft cheeses or uncured meats, no sushi, no cold medication, no stress, no overexertion. And according to ancient lore, a mother must fulfill each of her heart's longings prior to conception, or forever risk marking her child. I look at Teddy, who is playing on the floor nearby. When he stretches his arm to reach for a toy beyond his grasp, the sleeve of his shirt pulls up slightly, revealing his wrist. And I remember. I sit on the floor beside him and I playfully tug off one sock. He giggles and asks, "What are you doing, Mama?" I smile and say, "I want to see your foot." He lifts his leg compliantly, wiggling his toes, a pudgy foot proudly on display. I hold his bare foot in my hand and place my thumb over the mole I've lovingly stroked since his infancy. It has grown with him. The once tiny, barely noticeable speck, now an obvious imperfection on his pale skin. I put his foot down and reach for his right arm, gently pushing up the sleeve of his light blue shirt. I touch a second mole above his wrist. His 2 mother's marks. My 2 lost pregnancies before him. I kiss the top of his head and he smiles at me. Perhaps he is more marked by my grief than I realize.
Oh, that's, yeah. I mean, you could open to any part of the book and read an excerpt and just, tug on the heartstrings, right? If this book doesn't move you, nothing will, right?
It's been a while since I read that part. Any part with Teddy makes me extra emotional.
Oh, so. I know. And he's doing well, is he?
He is so well. He is 5.5 now.
Oh my goodness.
So, yes.
Wow. And looking forward to a busy summer, I'm sure.
Yes, very much so.
Well, and so how are you going to squeeze in your writing? So let's talk a little bit about you, Joanne, the author, and obviously you're working on another project. Mm-hmm. So what does your writing process look like?
With a small child, it's anywhere I can fit it in at this moment. So I still work at the hospital at the IWK, mm-hmm. and I work part-time there, and then I'm home with Teddy part-time. And a lot of my writing actually happens after he goes to bed. So, between the hours of 7:30 and say 10, mm-hmm. sometimes early morning. He is an early riser too. So sometimes I don't have as much time in the morning to write. When I was writing this book, I spent, kind of all of his nap times. Like he was still napping quite a bit during the day. So all my nap times I would be, furiously writing. I find I can't be too precious about how I write. I just have to kind of show up however I can, whether it's grabbing my phone when I have a few seconds to type out a note, and then I, add that in. Sometimes I take a voice note if I'm like walking to work and I think of something. So just trying to fit it in when I can. And then I have a wonderful supportive husband who helps out too. So I have time. He'll, take him and I can, spend an hour at my desk writing. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So is it at your desk most of the time? Is that where you like to do your writing?
Yeah,
or is
sometimes
it anywhere?
Anywhere in my house, I tend to set up, like at the kitchen counter where there's
Little mini
tea on hand, a
workstations.
lot of coffee. Yes.
Yeah.
I spend my evenings often in here in my
Uh-huh.
little, closet-sized library, as we call
I
it.
love it. I love it.
Yeah, so wherever I can. Yeah.
And can you share what you're working on?
Yes, so I'm working on a novel this time.
Yay!
What I always thought I would write, and
Mhm.
it's a very freeing creatively because I spent so long in the confines of my memoir, and
Yeah.
not being able to make up things to make it
Mhm.
fit
Mhm.
that's obviously a challenge when you're writing nonfiction. And so
Mhm.
in writing fiction, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can change that detail and then it
These
works.
puzzle pieces I can make fit better.
Right,
Right. Life is
right.
messy.
Yes,
I wanna
yes.
make it smoother.
Exactly, exactly. So
Fun.
yeah, so it's my novel. It's based loosely on my experiences as a nurse.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, I'm hoping, I have a first draft done now. So
Good.
as I mentioned, that terrible, horrible, awful first draft.
Once you get it out,
And
yeah, it's the
yeah,
bleh, yeah.
yeah, it's terrible. It doesn't even resemble a book. So if anyone is out there,
Pieces. Yeah,
just allow yourself to write
to
poorly the
to
first draft.
let it out. I always say,
Let it
just get
out.
the first shitty draft, get done. So is the main
Exactly.
character a nurse?
No, but they do have an experience at a pediatric hospital. So,
Okay. And
yes.
is it like a literary fiction, women's fiction, mystery?
Literary fiction right
Okay.
now with the
Mhm.
potential like historical fiction kind of B plot. So,
Ooh,
yeah.
2 of my faves.
Thank
Excellent. Well, I'll be so excited to see that, come out. So, do you have any, like,
you.
last thoughts or advice to share? What like, response what has the
Yeah.
response been? How do you feel about this award-winning
Oh my gosh. Just
persona? Huh.
so much gratitude for the entire experience of being able to write it and everything. And I've had a lot of women reach out to me and tell me their stories.
Mm.
And that's been incredibly healing and beautiful for me because I remember feeling that way. I read Kate Inglis's book, Field Notes to Grief, or no, Field Guide to Grief. And I read
Mhm.
Beth Powning, Shadow Child. And I reached out to them and I was like, your book meant so much to me. So I've been on the other side of that. And it's just so healing for all of us to kind of share that space together.
Mhm.
Um, and any advice that I have for people who are writing or at whatever stage in their author journey, if it's at the beginning stages, just find people who care about you and support you and will uplift you. And like you said, Anne, give you permission to just get that, terrible first draft out. And
I love that advice, people who
yeah,
love you and get you, and just
yeah,
surround yourself with that. And don't worry about, once you get it out there, don't worry about, if there's negative. But let me tell
no,
you, the reviews that I've read have been glowing. And just a little shout out to readers as well, to make sure that you show authors the love, get on Goodreads and Amazon and do reviews and reach out to authors on their social media. They love it, right?
I love it.
Am I
Every time
right?
I get a message, it's so nice.
Oh,
Yes.
excellent. Well, Joanne, thank you so much for joining us on the author journey today. I'm so excited about what's coming next, and I really look forward to it and wish you a wonderful summer, and give Teddy a little scrub on his head for me
I
with the
will.
curly
Thank you
hair.
so much. I know the big head of curly
Oh,
hair.
he
Thank you
gets
for
a
having
curl.
me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. Everybody, thank you for joining us on the author journey today, and have a wonderful summer. We'll be back in the fall. Please send me messages. Let me know what you'd like to hear about in the publishing space. But for now, I'll say bye, and we'll talk real soon. And happy last day of school to all the kids out there who have finished for the